Site of what was Boland's Bakery. You can see that there's a plaque up on the wall here that was put there in 1966 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the rising. You'll very often hear people mention this site as Boland's Mills. Boland's Mills is actually on the far side of the dock of the canal, but the Easter 16, this is actually where the headquarters of the Commandant de Valera was located, and where you are standing there on the corner was actually a dispensary building, and that's what they used for the week as their headquarters. The location here itself didn't see much fighting during the week. Most of the volunteers that were involved in the fighting were down along the railway track that we came under, and then at the next stop you'll see where most of the fighting took place. But this building was quite a large building, and it was a very defensive structure, so therefore there wasn't many attacks on it. One of the things that the volunteers did to make sure that they didn't come under attack was there was a couple of big buildings down along where we walked along earlier. There was a couple of storehouses, and there was a particular tall building, and what de Valera did was he got an Irish Republic flag, so the green flag with Irish Republic written on it. He got a couple of the lads to climb to the very top of the tower, and they put the flag up there. And what happened was the Helga gunboat that was down along the Liffey that was bombing the different locations, it shot at where the flag was. So the gunboat thought that the volunteers were based in a different building, and that's where they were firing on. So as I say, during Easter week, another thing that's interesting about this site, a number of the volunteers from the battalion actually worked in the bakery here, and during Easter week, up until about the Thursday, they continued to operate the bakery. So every day they made bread, and the bread was given out to people that lived around the area, with the result that when the surrender took place, and when the volunteers, when the surrender took place here, the volunteers came from just the corner here. They came out, they marched up along the road, and they took the first left, Grattan Street. They walked up into Grattan Street, and they smashed their guns on the ground, and they were met by the British, who brought them up onto Mount Street. And from there, the battalion were marched out to the RDS. They were held in the stables in the RDS for two, maybe 3 days, and then they were brought back through the city. They were marched from Ballsbridge back down to Inchicore to Richmond Barracks, and that's where all the volunteers across the city were held, and that was before they were shipped off in cattle boats from the quays over to Frongok. But a couple of the notes or a couple of the recollections mentioned that when the volunteers left here, the people in this area actually applauded them. Many of them offered to hide them in their houses or to hide their guns, and that was distinctly different to the reception many of the volunteers received in other parts of the city. And that was mainly due, I think, in part to the fact that during the week the volunteers in this area, as I say, distributed bread to the area. On a personal note, my own grandfather, Charles Murphy, was a lieutenant at the bakery here, and he didn't have far to come because he lived in this street over here, Albert Place East, in number 7. So you can imagine he had 6 brothers, and his mother and father were living just behind this pub, and he was in Boland's Bakery, and he also fought along the railway tracks. So that would be my own personal connection to this location. Another point would be when the surrender came, and Nurse Elizabeth O'Farrell, and I think it's worth mentioning the bravery, like we can talk about the volunteers themselves that were involved in the fighting. Elizabeth O'Farrell, a nurse, was the one that was asked by Pádraig Pearse to bring the surrender to the different garrisons around Dublin. When she arrived here, de Valera didn't know her and refused to accept the surrender notice. She had to leave here, and she had to traipse across the city to all the different garrisons in very dangerous circumstances, you know, and it was as brave or even braver than any of the volunteers. She ended up having to go to Jacob's Bakery to McDonagh, and de Valera would only surrender if he got notification from McDonagh. Nurse Elizabeth O'Farrell then had to come back and that's when De Valera accepted the surrender. Right, so that's Boland's Bakery. Unfortunately today, it's actually the head office of the National Treasury Management Agency, and that's where NAMA is based, so a bit unfortunate. I think if you were to look 100 years back, the brave volunteers wouldn't have envisaged that this location would now be the head office of, you know, one of the agencies that's been involved in the bankruptcy of the country. Right, we're going to go up the road here to the scene of one of the, I suppose, the bloodiest battles of 1916.